CDH1 germline mutations significantly increase the lifetime risk of hereditary diffuse gastric cancers. And according to hereditary diffuse gastric cancer.org, they estimate a lifetime risk of developing this hard to detect form of stomach cancer with a lifetime risk cited anywhere between 70 to 80%.
Being a woman, it's not just gastric cancer, it's gastric cancer and breast cancer that have significantly higher association. Also, the only way to not die of stomach cancer was to remove your stomach. Typically, gastric cancer isn't diagnosed until it's in its later stages, and there's not a lot of effective ways to treat it, or there weren't at the time. This was one of the rarest and most deadly cancers because it's diagnosed late and because there aren't a lot of effective treatments. And I wasn't interested in pursuing a life that I had to battle cancer like that. So if there was a way that I could preempt this, I was interested in exploring what that looked like. So when I found this study at the NIH, it gave me a lot of peace to know that this one person is focused exclusively on this, that he probably works with the highest amount of patients concentrated than anybody else. I officially got diagnosed as a cancer survivor 2 weeks after my surgery. So when they did the pathology, they found 17 spots of cancer that we didn't know were there when they took out my stomach. So it ended up saving my life.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast dedicated for patients and their families to figure out this wonderful world of genetics and genomics. You can find us at geneticsforhealthcare.com or wherever you get your podcast. And from there on our website, you can go to any of our social media platforms to follow us to get updates on incredible new episodes like this one. Today, we are privileged to have Stacey Martin, CDH1 variant carrier and CEO of Seahorse Snacks. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us on Genetics for Healthcare.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So you've got an amazing story around being a champion for CDH1 variant carriers. And we'll get into the decisions that you made, but tell us, did you have a family history of cancer growing up that kind of alerted you to find out about your genetic variants that you might be carrying?
Absolutely not. This was a thing that happened to me in my 40s. So in midlife, I guess. In 2017, my mom got diagnosed with a stage 4 uterine cancer. And during her journey, one of the doctors suggested that she did genetic testing. So we were trying to figure out why she had the cancer that she had. And it turns out that it was just cancer and it wasn't genetic, but then we found out she had the CDH1 genetic mutation. I was in the doctor's office with her when she found out about it. And because she was already facing stage 4 uterine cancer, it felt like another thing, but it didn't feel like a priority. And I remember when the geneticist was talking to her and explaining to her what CDH1 positive meant, I was like, oh, this is bad. But it was her bad. It wasn't my bad.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's genetic. So there's a 50% chance that me, my brother, and my sister had it. So, like a year later, I got tested and I was the only one out of my siblings that carried it. So
Wow.
we never we didn't know about a family history. There was not other people in my family had cancer because that's what happens, but it wasn't this, and it was just random as far as we knew.
I got to give a shout out to the clinician who even suggested it, because I don't know how long ago that was, Stacey, but even today, much of the conversation that we have with guests on my show and in the industry in general is that physicians aren't aware of these tests, or it's hard in the midst of clinic to say, okay, this person has this type of malignancy or this type of condition. They should be genetic tested, find out what tests to run, what lab can do the test. Oh, by the way, is insurance covering this, and all those things with the exposure. So like, I really got to give credit to that astute clinician who suggested genetic testing. What were the thoughts and emotions that you experienced when you were learning about genetic testing and what that would tell you?
Well, spoiler alert, that clinician is what ended up saving my life because we had the opportunity to know. So when my mom was going through it, and ironically, my mom is a triplet, and her other two siblings that she shared the womb with do not have it, which is really, really interesting. So they were identical, and my mom was a fraternal.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's crazy. So my mom was being treated at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So it is like a really amazing medical center. They do a phenomenal job of treating patients. They're also pretty advanced in research and all kinds of things. So eternally grateful for them for pursuing this avenue. So when we found out about my mom's stuff, again, it was like secondary. We were just trying to get her better. Also, spoiler alert, she's still alive and she's doing really, really well. So she beat her cancer diagnosis and now she's doing surveillance for this. But you don't know really what it means. And when it's somebody else that's being diagnosed, it's like their stuff.
Mm.
And then, so after I was done taking care of my mom, I moved to Chattanooga, which is where I live now. I didn't know anybody. I was like, let me just get this genetic test because I don't always want to think about, what this thing hanging over me. So I just got my kit sent to me. I went to the hospital, they drew blood and I mailed it off. And I was like, I just want to get this out of the way so I don't have to think about it anymore. Like, I had just bought a house here. I didn't have a doctor here. I barely knew anybody here. And it was just one more thing off the list so that I could just move on with my life. Then it came back positive. That was not like what I was ever expecting. It was crazy the way that I found out because I got a notification on an app that I had test results and the results were right there in the app. So nobody called me. I didn't have an appointment. Like, I'm in sales. So I had customer meetings that day. My housekeeper was at the house. Like, all of a sudden I open up this app and it says you are CDH1 positive and it lists the whole gene thing. And I was like, I don't know what this means, but am I going to die? Like, I literally
Mm.
thought I was going to die. And there was nobody for me to reach out to. The doctor was on a trip. And so I didn't even hear from her for 3 days later until 3 days later. So that is, I highly recommend not to find out that way. And they should have some parameters in place so people don't find out that way. You should meet with a genetic counselor and they should like walk you through it. But yeah, it was crazy. You always think that, like, I thought I was an underdog. I thought like, oh, it'll be fine. I just want to get peace of mind so I can move on. And I don't think anybody could ever be fully prepared for what it means. And then your mind goes on a whole nother adventure after that.
So that whole moment in time, finding out that information from your app, I mean, is it's scary. It's arresting. Like, how did you process in that moment and be able to move to some sense of clarity about what's next?
It was definitely a process. So we started with ugly crying because there was nothing else I could do. Like, and it was just like I literally thought I was going to die. And I was sitting here by myself. And then, oh, by the way, in 45 minutes, I have to go to a client meeting. So I didn't have a lot of time to like process or grieve or what does this mean? I called my sister. She tried to call the doctor. And then the next day I was leaving on a business trip. So like my life was so crazy and things moved so fast. So I really had to sort of like compartmentalize processing and research and advocating and trying to figure this out for myself because I literally didn't have any time. Um, so once the doctor called me and I was sitting at the O'Hare airport in Chicago, and she's like, You're going to be okay. Like, we just have to bring you in here to make sure that we can do all the tests and do all the assessments to see where you are. You're not going to die. Like, there's no impending like thing that needs to happen right now. We just know. And then now we're going to investigate. So they told me that I needed to book 2 weeks in Rochester, Minnesota to do all of my tests. So I just had to disappear from my life for 2 weeks. And I was like, I can't do that. Also, I can't tell work because I don't know what's wrong with me. And I
Yeah.
can't like I can't just disappear from my life. So I used all my Marriott points and I booked a hotel room for 10 days at the Marriott. So I could go, had to fly to Rochester. It
which
was
is not
in
easy.
no, getting there, it's a journey, and it was in the winter. So nobody
Wow.
wants to go to Rochester, Minnesota in the middle of winter. So we got there and I did all the tests. I did my endoscopy, I did my breast MRI, did a mammogram, all the things, and we didn't find anything. So that was, I met with a surgeon, I met with a dietitian, I met with a genetic counselor. So I met with the full team, and I think I went home after like 3 days, which was amazing. But then it gave me, I knew I wasn't like, it wasn't an emergency. I needed to solve this problem, but it wasn't right now. So that gave me time to like think and research and try and figure out what this meant on my own. Also, when I was at the Mayo Clinic, the genetic counselor gave me like a little flyer about a research study that they were doing at the NIH that was centered around CDH1. So after I got home, I sort of did a lot of research. I was looking into biohacking myself, like if I could Joe Dispenza mind over matter this. I looked into going to Switzerland to get my genes edited. I did Reiki, see if I could get all get all my vibes together and get it out of me. So there was like a lot of like rationalizing, like um, I guess it's the 7 stages of grief while you're trying to figure everything out. And meanwhile, the world keeps turning, like work is crazy, like all the things. Back then, I was traveling so much, I would come home, dump my suitcase, pack a different suitcase, and leave. And if I was home long enough to buy groceries, it was like a big deal. So this did not fit into my life.
So you learned that you were a CDH1 germline mutation carrier because your mother was tested positive for that.
Yep.
She's the only one of her two other siblings. She's a triplet. She's the only one that carried that variant. And of your 3 siblings, you were the only one to carry that variant. CDH1 germline mutations significantly increase the lifetime risk of hereditary diffuse gastric cancers. And according to hereditary diffuse gastric cancer.org, they estimate a lifetime risk of developing this hard to detect form of stomach cancer with a lifetime risk cited anywhere between 70 to 80% in both men and women. What did you learn about that when you finally got to talk to the clinician? Maybe they referred you to genetic counseling. What did you learn that led you to weigh the risk and benefits of the preventative decision that you made?
Being a woman, it's not just gastric cancer, it's gastric cancer and breast cancer that have significantly higher association. So when I found out about this, it was February 6th, 2019, was the day that I found out that I was a carrier. And so at that time, there wasn't a significant amount of information out there and it varied widely. So at the time, they thought this gene occurred in 1 in 9 million people. So it was super, super rare. Now, since there's been a lot of research, a lot more research, they think it's down between 1 in 100 or 200,000. So it's more prevalent than originally expected. Um, Also, the only way to not die of stomach cancer was to remove your stomach. So that was like a super, I could do surveillance or I could have my stomach removed. And that's a really pretty big fork in the road of which way that this is going to go. Also, I learned that lobular breast cancer, I had about a 67% chance of getting that in my lifetime as well. So it was a multifaceted situation because we learned about the stomach cancer part of it, the gastric cancer part of it first. I guess that's what I tackled because that felt like a harder problem to solve than the breast cancer piece of it. And so, and because we did all my initial assessments and scans and everything, and there weren't any abnormal findings, we had time, but I felt like it was a decision that I had to make. Did I want to do surveillance every 6 months? for my breast and for my stomach and just wait in between scans to see if that person had a good night's sleep before the night before so that they could read
Yeah.
it accurately. Did somebody go out last night? Is this somebody filling in? Is there an intern? Like we're still humans as we show up every day. So I didn't want somebody's bad day to buy me another 6 months and have cancer grow, and we couldn't handle it. So typically, gastric cancer isn't diagnosed until it's in its later stages. And there's not a lot of effective ways to treat it, or there weren't at the time. Things have come along really, they're going pretty well now as far as research, but that's because there's funding. So this was one of the rarest and most deadly cancers because it's diagnosed late and because there aren't a lot of effective treatments. And I wasn't interested in pursuing a life that I had to battle cancer like that. So if there was a way that I could preempt this, I was interested in exploring what that looked like. So I did as much research as I could, but it's really scary and there's a lot of unknowns. Um, so when I found this study at the NIH, it gave me a lot of peace to know that this one person is focused exclusively on this, that he probably works with the highest amount of patients concentrated than anybody else in this country. And the fact that if I could give back and they could learn things research wise through my journey, that was really appealing to me. So that's how I found the NIH.
This your story is a classic example of what we try to do here at Genetics for Healthcare. We really want to inform and empower. We want this genetic information to be empowering and not intimidating. And you captured it, all the raw emotions when you first found out, but then you were led to information with experts who empowered you to make these decisions. And you said you were led to was it a study at the National Institutes of Health or the NIH?
Yep, it was a longitudinal study, which has closed now due to lack of funding. But I
Hmm.
had the benefits of finding it while it was still open and contributing to their research. Yes.
Okay. And so when you made the decision to have your stomach removed, what was that conversation like, and what was your support system?
So it's really interesting because I live here by myself. My family lives in different states, many, many hours away. So, and I had just moved to Chattanooga. So I didn't, one of the reasons that I moved here, when I moved here, was to like build community and live in a neighborhood where I knew my neighbors. And it's pretty ironic. I didn't realize how important that decision was going to be at the
Mhm.
time, but it really like came through. So, um, my mom and my sister live in North Dakota, so they're pretty far away. It's 3 planes to get here, or 24 hours driving. And the doctor was in Bethesda, Maryland. So like there's this little triangle going on. But when I first found out about this, one of the first decisions I made was to get a therapist because I wanted to her to meet me before surgery. So she sort of established a baseline. So whatever was going to happen after surgery, that she knew where we were starting from because I didn't know what it was going to be like. Also, it was a huge life change that was in front of me. And I didn't know all the things, all the life things that we're going to be competing with just recovery and staying alive. So also I made a calendar for all my friends and I filled it up for 12 weeks and I sent it to them and I said, pick a week because you're all coming to take care of me. So people signed up for a week at a time and I imported my help for 12 weeks, which was like amazing. I'm a fiercely independent person. So to ask for help, number one, was really scary. But it was like the biggest blessing because I got to spend a solid week with each person and like create little memories with them and allow them to help me. And it was like the best gift ever. So,
So when you had the surgery, how did it go for you, and what were they finding going into it? There was, no clear evidence of disease that you were looking to eliminate or resect. But how did the surgery go?
yeah, so it was crazy. I remember walking into the third floor and it was like adult oncology. And I was like, it's so weird. Like, I'm not sick. Like, I was a fully functioning, very healthy person walking into the hospital. and they were doing like all my blood tests, and there I had a roommate in the room and I didn't know who she was. And so she was listening to all the things that we were going through, I guess. And my mom and my sister told me later, she was like, "Is she going to be okay? This sounds really bad." I'm glad they didn't tell me that at the beginning. But it's like when I first found out and fully understood like what was happening and what I was going to do, I made a food bucket list
Mm.
because I didn't know if I was going to be able to eat like I ate before surgery. So all the things I ever wanted to eat and all the restaurants I ever wanted to go to all over the country, I just made a list and started like for 3 months. We just went in and we went everywhere. I was in New York and I had lobster rolls for breakfast at the plaza. I went to Peter Luger's Steakhouse and had an amazing steak for lunch. There was a restaurant in Maine called the Lost Kitchen where you mail in a postcard and they have to pick it and then you get to go there. And they picked my postcard on the very first day. And we got to sit at the little bar where they're cooking all the food and we met the owner. It was just like the universe knew what it was doing and it gave me all the opportunities. And I was really thoughtful about all the dinners and lunches that I arranged with different people. So it was great. And by the end of it, I was like, I don't know if I really want to eat anymore." So that was one of the things. Um, and then I started working out so that I could be really strong, so that recovery would be easier. It was mostly like, how's my life going to be? There's a lot of Facebook groups with people who are just diagnosed or are recovering. And I was really protective of like my mental space because sometimes those groups get a little bit negative and people do a lot of ranting and complaining about things. My outlook is a little bit different. So I just said there's so many things that could be different about everything. So I know that I've made it through 100% of what I've been through so far. I've got a really good track record. And I truly believe that whenever I'm handed at whatever time, I will be able to successfully navigate this. So I really just didn't like look at all the blogs and look at all the posts to see people complaining about things and whatever, because it's hard. But I didn't know what it was going to be like. And there's so many variables that I can't factor what if for each one. And I didn't want to spend my energy that way. So I just like filled my life with things that I wanted to do in case I'd never be able to do them again.
And what was the outcome of the surgery and your recovery like?
Yeah. So I officially got diagnosed as a cancer survivor 2 weeks after my surgery. So when they did the pathology, they found 17 spots of cancer that we didn't know were there when they took out my stomach. So it ended up saving my life. I was at the hospital, I think, for 7 days. I stayed at the lodge at the NIH for a couple days before I went home. So surgery went really well. I didn't have any complications, which is crazy. You think they take out this whole big organ and they're really masters at it. So I've been very, very fortunate. I flew home 10 days later and it was just like recovering. That part is the hardest part. So the first year after surgery is sprinkled with good days and not good days. And sometimes they both happen on the same day. You have to learn how to eat again. Your body has to like learn how to process your food and you have to manage your energy levels. At the very beginning, I would eat, I would fall asleep on the couch. My timer would go off and I'd eat again and I'd fall asleep on the couch. And I was like a baby. And I was
Mm.
like, I am never going to get back to my life. Like, I had a really busy, full life before. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But then I started thinking about it. Like, recovering is the only job that I have to do. Like, I don't have to go and be and do. Like, I just have to get myself better. So I was really fortunate and I had 16 weeks off of work after surgery. So I literally just like I would try to push myself to do things like, oh, let's go to Costco today, and just like walk around. Or I remember my first trip to the grocery store. So eating is a lot different now after surgery, and I had to look at the nutrition labels of everything. So it took me like 4 hours at the grocery store the first time I went. Like I had to stop and eat snacks while I was at the grocery store so I could finish grocery shopping. So, but it gets better, and sometimes there's like crappy days thrown in there, but you learn like all the tools in your toolbox, what you can do to make yourself feel better. So the first year is really, really the hardest, but also very shortly after my surgery. So I had my total gastrectomy in September of 2019. And what happened in the spring of 2020? COVID. So everybody was like shut at home. And I was like, oh, this actually kind of extends my runway a little bit because nobody's doing anything. I'm not missing out on anything. And it just gave me extra time to sort of heal and learn how to figure it out.
I've heard you talk on other broadcasts around the adjustment, as you just mentioned, how to keep your energy up. Were there any other day to day life changes that you had to do, and were there any good or bad surprises with that?
I mean, I feel like it's just a constant evolution. Like at the beginning, I could drink water, regular water. Then it would make me nauseous. So the surface tension of water is really high. So when it hits the tube, it feels like a little lead ball and it makes me
Mm.
nauseous. So then I had to experiment with electrolytes. So now I'm 6 years out, I think. And I still drink electrolytes in my water every day. So it's just like figuring out what works and what doesn't. Sometimes I could eat the same thing every day for breakfast. It's usually yogurt with berries and maybe some granola. But some days it's just like today's not going to be a good day. So it's just figuring things out. And then also the way that we eat is different. They just re-released the food pyramid. Uh
Yeah.
and so actually that's how I eat most of the time. So I always reprioritize. So it's like meat, veg, and then carbs if I have room for it. So it's I don't know, I get to eat a lot of things, a variety of things, not a quantity of things. So I
And
don't
that's
get
how you
bored,
keep
but
your
it's
energy up?
yeah, protein helps me keep the energy pretty steady. If we eat too much carbs, like reactive hypoglycemia is one of the side effects of this surgery. We have to be super careful about how much sugar we consume. Alcohol hits different, very different. So there's just like a lot of learnings that you have to figure out. Some people quit drinking completely because they can't handle it because it goes directly into your small intestine now. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like mainlining. uh, so it's just there's a lot of like little nuances, and so it's just like you try a little. If it doesn't work, you wait a couple months and you try again. So you have to be really gracious with yourself and really patient. And also, probably the biggest thing is self care is no longer like negotiable. Before, I would just like work all day, skip lunch, grab something on the way. Now I'm like, people love traveling with me because I always have snacks. I'm always going to stop at Starbucks and get a coffee with milk, like a latte. And nobody can argue with me when I say we're stopping for food. So I don't know.
Well, there are people out there who may have a family history, or it's been recommended that they go to genetic counseling or and get a genetic test, but they're hesitant. How has this life-changing decision from what you found out around the genes that you carry, the genes that you inherited that increase not only your risk for developing gastric cancer, but also lobular breast cancer, how has this decision changed your perspective on life?
Well, I always said that I have one lap and I was trying to make the most of it, but now that has very different meaning. I think I fought really hard to have my voice now, so I use it a lot more in all aspects of my life. As far as like the decision to get genetic testing, it's not an easy decision to make because there's a lot of implications that come along with it. If you do not have the foresight to make sure that you are protected with like life insurance, long term care insurance, deciding to get genetic testing before you do that could exclude you from being able to get that coverage later once you find out the results of your test. Unlike health insurance, they can take these things into account and not decide not to insure you. So that's a huge decision to think about before you get genetic testing. Also, some people don't want to know and they're like, well, I'll just deal with it as it comes. But I feel like if there's something that you can do to help mitigate your chances of dying early or being tortured before you die. Obviously, this is my opinion, but I would want to do something about it. Like, I'm a maximizer and I just want to have the best lap that I can have. And that does not include having cancer.
Yeah. And the key here is we want people to have the information. If you can have it, you can act upon it, and that's when knowledge becomes power, right? Knowledge in and of itself is not powerful unless you're doing something with it. So for those who want to seek out those alternatives or what their options are for long-term quality of life, and like you said, to maximize our time here, you can do something with that information if you have it. What do you wish that healthcare providers and the hospital systems would do better to increase like patient engagement and understanding of preventative genetics and genomics? You were at the Mayo Clinic. Your mother was treated at the Mayo Clinic. You went back to the Mayo Clinic. That is one of the premier, healthcare institutions, certainly cancer centers in the country, in the world. But there's someone listening to this who lives in a small town outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. What do you wish healthcare providers and the hospital systems would do more of to engage their patient in these types of conversations around genetic testing?
Well, first of all, I wish we didn't have the barriers of healthcare as a business in this country because I think access prevents a lot of people from figuring these things out to begin with. But I'm not going to get on that soapbox. But
Well,
I
that's what
think,
we're all about. So I tap dance on that soapbox, but I digress.
yep. I think if knowledge is power, absolutely. And so the more you can advocate for yourself. I think a lot of healthcare providers will like yield or will take cues from the patient, especially if they're really passionate about things or ask a lot of questions and do a lot of research. Unfortunately, I think when you don't go to a center of excellence or you're not at a NCI or NCCN center, where they know a lot about cancer and genetic testing, you have to do all of the legwork. And that's an incredibly hard situation to be in when you're just learning about, oh my God, I have this really crazy thing and I think I'm going to die and I don't know what to do and I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know what my insurance is going to cover. Most of the hospitals have like teams to help with financial, like offsetting costs and whatever. Like it's a really privileged thing for me to say this, but it doesn't matter how much it costs and it doesn't matter. Like, this is your life at stake. And if you're not getting what you need or what you want, or you're not getting a respectful response to things that you're asking for, go find somebody else. And like, it's really hard to go to the hospital or to go to treatment when you don't have your job or you don't have a car or you don't have all these things, but there are resources available and you literally have one life. And so I just personally don't think that I'm not negotiating for whatever if somebody doesn't know this and they're not willing to listen to me. I had one doctor tell me just go on a plant-based diet and you'll be fine. I was like, I don't really know where you went to medical school, but this isn't like a negotiable kind of thing. And there's no amount of vegetables that I could eat in my entire life and not die from this. So that was the last time we had a conversation. So it was like, just your life is too precious to leave it to somebody else. And I know that these people are medical experts and they went to school for a really long time, but they're also humans and they can't know everything about everything. So if there's a way that you can bring information to them and they're willing to learn and be like a partner with you, that's somebody that I would lean into. And the costs and figuring things out, we can all figure that out later. I know it's extra stress to add on to this, but it's too important not to look at things that way.
That's absolutely true. And here's the reality. This is what I personally want, my audience to know as we do this podcast every week. Access to genetic and genomic testing, your clinicians may not understand the different tests that might be appropriate. And there's a lot of uncertainty around the affordability and whether your health plan will pay for them. The labs that do the testing, no matter what company is out there, generally will work with the patient that if it's not covered by your insurance, they will make it affordable for you through a payment plan or a cost that you might be able to afford. Secondly, if you advocate for yourself and you have a family history or a series of events that lead up to these conversations, if you advocate for yourself, your insurance provider will likely pay for the test to prevent downstream cost of a cancer diagnosis or increased healthcare risk that will increase their cost of covering you and keeping you healthy. So that's a very important thing to know. If you advocate for yourself, no matter what anybody says about cost, exactly what you said, Stacey, is key. It's information that could save your life. And not only your life, the life of future generations to come in your family. So it's worth it, and don't let costs keep you from this information.
Absolutely. Just one more thing to add to that too. There are a lot of like nonprofits that are focused on work around whatever cancer that you have, and they partner typically with labs as well to get like a preferred rate, like a family rate. If your care provider isn't participating in this, maybe you can get it through one of them as well at a reduced cost. And then you also probably will find more resources adjacent to your challenge and support to come along with it.
Absolutely. And you can find those resources on our website, geneticsforhealthcare.com. Many of those patient advocacy groups that do pay for genetic testing and different types of screening for various conditions that are associated with chronic genetic diseases like cancer. You can find those groups and engage with them from our website. Just go and click the resources tabs and you'll see those as well. I love to ask Stacey, our guest, for 3 practical tips because there's someone listening to this and you so courageously made the decisions based on the information that you got. You allowed yourself to be empowered and had a paradigm shift. What are some practical tips that you would suggest to someone to educate and advocate for themselves to get genetic testing in order to sustain and improve their health?
When you are working through things and you're trying to figure out like the problem is, if you've tried a lot of things and you don't know your family history, I think it's compelling to like, let's just check this box to make sure it's not a genetic thing. With the advances in research and science and all these things, like they're finding things out every single day. So it may not have been a thing 15 years ago when you got tested or 10 years ago, but then they've discovered something now. But finding community. So if you find a place where there are other people that are suffering or affected by the same thing that you have, my gene only represents 2% of all gastric cancer. So most gastric cancer is non-genetic. So mine is super rare, but there are people every day being diagnosed with stomach cancer. So finding a group that has what you have and then finding people inside of that group, it's a lot of power, and finding community too.
Thank you for that. Stacey Martin, CDH1 variant carrier, CEO of Seahorse Snacks. Thank you for being a guest on Genetics for Healthcare.
Thanks for having me.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.